So a key feature is we really could get some good microphone over line, but online, but there's nobody here today, so it doesn't matter because the mic won't, we don't have any power in this place. And like this whole room is devoid of amps. The only place that has an amp is the electric. We're live. Yes, Rob. There's a delay of, I'm gonna actually have to turn that down.
Is Zoom open as well?
Actually, this brings up a problem. Like, how do I play the music without getting feedback? Anyway, we'll worry about that later. That's in the debrief. We're good. We are good, Robin. You're ready to rock and roll. And don't worry, the live stream is not recorded. It just disappears. Yeah. So look at the quality. It's pretty good, right?
Yeah, that really is.
Yeah, it is great.
Fantastic. Are you able to record it, or are we?
This one we're recording.
We can do this.
Yeah, we're recording it. And I can put it in Kaltura and just zip off the beginning, the stuff.
Yeah.
And use Kaltura as simple. That's as far as I go in my memory. So yeah, we're totally good. This is great. We could even move it further back and get those two, but what the heck? It's just a. You know, we no, it's good. It's good. Sophia.
Michael.
So did you get to the Parliament?
So I didn't get to go because wait, what are you talking?
There's like a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Yeah, I never got to go because of COVID. I did the program and we got to talk to all the leaders in the like one-on-one, just literally talk. We got to talk to Kim Campbell, which was so Jody on the table. So yeah, Kim Campbell. Yeah, I was very happy.
Even when you were 18.
It started when I
Really interesting. Yeah, no, it's like, you know, from a teacher, like a guy's perspective, it's remarkable. The reason I did this 5 years past all the way down, because you know, it's like a lot of people. Like some people just have growth spurts at 18, some people have 25. Me, I had mine at 40. But you know, it's remarkable. So I was never have that job. I actually use you in my class. I do. I totally do. And so that's why I tell the teachers all the time. Like, he's trying to figure it out. And he's trying to figure it out. Because he's trying to figure it out.
No, so I actually did communication and was funny because I declared my minor in psychology. 2 weeks later, they came out with the legal studies.
Well, yeah,
But I've already completed half my psychology. Remember, I want to go to law school, so I'm still working towards that.
Yeah.
I take my GMAT in August, and the LSAT next year.
Okay, come back to me if I got to the LSAT.
Okay.
The best look ever.
I need this.
No, it's called LSAT classes. I got both Brandy and Ontario. And it's so close. Most of the time you just run through tests. Random something. It's called.
Well, I think got an option now, right?
Yeah.
So everything else.
And so the deal is you can run out of tests and then you have to go out and practice. And those are terrible. They don't prepare you. But this guy was amazing. The best. And that's what you yeah, no, I'm so glad I ran into you.
I know, you can keep your office.
Well, I see how good you're doing and you're engaging in life. So.
I came to your office the other day, I guess you weren't there. And I saw all those messages still there.
Yeah,
That's
Delilah. Yeah, she did great. You too. So if we had a boom mic, we'd normally put that on there and they'd switch it or they keep it still. But here's the quality of the picture. And I haven't touched the settings. I could touch the settings. We're live on YouTube as well. But just so you know, this is the quality you get from this camera. So it's, yeah, why not? Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. Perfect. Okay. Now I could change the settings a little bit to get it even better, but yeah, it's just a trial run. It's perfect. So anyway, this is what we can do. And just FYI, there's a great photographer here. It's called Ty photographer. We used to have a photographer change, and instead of spending $40 an hour every now and again, you should really be paying me 30 or no, I'm joking. But we should actually be thinking about using our media marketing team or Ty, our photographer. Come on, once this is $300. This is $5. This is the expensive camera. It's $300. But this boom arm is $75. And you know, so I phoned down from it. We don't have like any of this stuff. And what we have is like 1980s Canon. Yeah. So anyway, you can see how simple it is. Really good quality. So, and I'd like to get better at this, so I can do anything I want up until the Ty's he's actually a really good guy. He's a great photographer. And maybe he's busy with his other photography work, but you can see how simple this is. You know? Although $40 an hour is a great deal. It is, that is a great deal. So we should, I agree.
But, you know, if there is ever a time where we're having an event, we have like hundreds of like,
And this is really good. You're not getting
this is really good. I wasn't expecting it to be like this.
yes, and I could increase the light because there's a back thing that I'm still figuring out. We could have had a light here and a light there, but then there's like $40 or whatever. But you know, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. The light source is coming from behind, which is what you want. And I could make it a little lighter because I have a settings program, but I'd have to play with it a little bit more. Anyway, there you go. So we can do this again. Let's do this again. So we can do this again. I can go to the Pinnacle and I can set up a little thing, and then I can invite a guest or two over to my table, do 5 minutes with this, clicking at this, and then cut it, start recording again, that kind of stuff. We can do that stuff. Okay, anyway, I wanted to show you. And we're live on the YouTube too. Yes, okay. No microphone, but that doesn't matter. We don't have anybody online. So there's nobody online. So it's okay, but my bad. Who's in charge of music? Dina, are you the DJ? Who's the DJ? Are you the DJ? Oh, okay, okay. Anytime.
Bring it on.
Are we good to start? Okay.
This. This was it was going to clamp onto here, and then we'd have a mic that could stand beside you, and you could either swing it over and tilt it instead of two mics. Yeah, and make you look like podcasters. Yes, but unfortunately, no mic. So. Yeah, this thing is very good quality. It's small, but it's excellent quality. So you'll see it afterwards. It'll work out okay. Oh, we need shine behind. That's all we need. Yeah, that's right. Can't have shine in front. You need the shine from behind. Maybe we could, Alex, would you mind closing the doors?
All right. Well, I think we should probably get started. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming today. This is, as you can see, our first sort of in conversation with. My name is Robin Furby. I'm an instructor in the School of Business, and I'll be your host for the next sort of half an hour or so. And I would like to thank you, and any of you that are joining us online, I would like to thank you as well. Before we begin today, I would like to start, if I may, just with a land acknowledgement. We would respectfully acknowledge that Capilano University is located on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Lillooet, the Musqueam, Seychelles, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here today. In what we plan to become a regular In Conversation series, I would like you to join me, please, in welcoming our first guest today, which is the Dean of the Faculty of Business and Professional Studies, Dennis Silverstone. Just before we begin with my first question for you, Dennis, I just would like to ask and remind the audience that towards the end of today's session, I'm going to open it up for Q&A, and Dennis is usually very open about receiving questions. If there's anything that you would like to ask Dennis as a person or Dennis as a dean, with obviously respect, of course, but please think of some questions that you might like to ask, and we'll definitely open that up as we come through. So I'm going to kick things off with my first question. Dennis, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My first question, and this was one that perhaps was inspired by maybe some of the audience, maybe not necessarily knowing a lot about this, but straight out of the gate, could you tell us, like, what is a dean and how do you become one?
That's a great question. So I'll think on the first part with regards to what a dean is, and I'll try not to get too deep into the weeds, but just to talk a little bit about the nature of the university, because it really speaks to the role that a dean has. So university like Capilano was created by legislation of the province, and what that legislation lays out is what's known as a bicameral governance model. And if you think about the House of Commons and Senate, you have an example of that kind of a structure. So at the university, what we have is Senate and Board of Governors. And so the role of a dean actually touches both of those realms. So the Senate, it's around academic governance, what programs, quality of education, what courses, who teaches, what are qualifications of the instructors, etc. And in that realm, the dean is actually the chair of the faculty. So it's not a managerial role in the classic sense. It's a member of the collegium who's working with colleagues to be able to fulfill the mandate of the academic mission of the university. On the Board of Governors side, the board is responsible for, I'll call it the business of running the university, the budget, the facilities, the grounds, and all of the kind of the infrastructure that the university needs. In terms of the dean's role as it relates to that part of the university, that's really about being a manager and the control of and responsibility for the resources that are being available to a given faculty. So the world of any dean, not just in particular, kind of moves between those two realms. One in terms of facilitating activity, the other in terms of managing resources. And sometimes it's interesting because people in this academic realm, you work like a manager, but a dean can't go to a faculty member, as you're well aware, and say, Robin, I really think you should include this in your course, or I think you should teach your course this way, or even think you should teach course X. There's a significant amount of agency held by individual faculty members through academic freedom with the departments in terms of their role in that academic governance. So that relationship there is one of really trying to have shared vision, and then working through negotiation, dialogue, and hopefully collegial outcomes. So it's the ability to track between those two. But I think in terms of the deans I've worked with, those are the ones that are most successful. They can move between those two realms smoothly and understand the difference in terms of what's required for the university to work on.
This is like a follow-up to that though. In that kind of role, it means in some respects you've got to have sort of different leadership skills to work with this group than you would with this group, and yet at the same time, on a daily basis, you're jumping between the two, or you're taking information from one and bringing it back to the other. So it takes a almost a unique skill set, right? To work with both sets of people at the same time.
Well, I would say, the deans who I've worked with that have done it well in that academic realm really come at it from a relational perspective, and doing that in a way that enables that, set of departments or schools to have some sort of shared vision in terms of their collective mission moving forward. And then is supportive of the work that's going on in the respective departments. And anybody who would arrive expecting that they can use a managerial command and control approach in that domain will be very unsuccessful. So it is that awareness is really critical, given that most deans, sort of move into their positions after having been faculty members and chairs of departments. Usually they're pretty familiar with that. It would be rare that you see the people provide that didn't have that kind of previous experience. Occasionally it happens in some technical areas, but for the most part, it's made their way up through the ranks.
So the pathway to becoming a dean, in a sense, is usually that you've been involved as a faculty at some stage, and then you have a better understanding of the system in which you might be operating.
I think you put it this way. I mean, that lived experience is really important.
Yeah.
Right? For somebody to arrive and not have had experience with that particular type of operation,
Right.
It would be very easy to get oneself into difficulty with colleagues, because that approach will clash heavily with the culture and it's more than culture. It's the imperatives of a collegial environment, right? So just to share, I'm not sure everybody here is part of the department, but in a university, a lot of the work that happens is done by colleagues. So for example, evaluation at the university is handled primarily, not exclusively, but primarily and substantially by colleagues of the individual who's being evaluated. If you were in a university, say, that have rank and tenure with full professors, then rank and tenure is usually handled by the colleagues of that person in the particular department. So it's a different approach to leadership and to management. And the melding of those two is what determines if the university can be successful. Because you can look across other positions, provost, or vice president, academic, president, they all have to move back and forth between those two realms, and hopefully do both sides of the work relatively effective.
Without wishing to put you in an awkward position, can that be frustrating at times, that you're working one way and then having to switch and recognizing that both parties are important at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, sure, it can be.
Yeah.
Like if I have an idea for something that I think would be great for us to do as a faculty, or that might land in a particular department, that in and of itself won't get that idea accomplished. I've got to persuade others that this is a good direction to go. I set the stage for it and hopefully make the case. So there have been occasions across my career where, I have been frustrated, but I think we really need to do this. But it requires kind of, I guess, a commitment to that relationship and building trust and credibility
Yes.
with the people that you're working with in your faculty to move that forward. And I guess maybe just talking about, I wouldn't call it frustration, but it is a educational piece that and conversations I've been involved with over time is helping people who work on the business side of the university, whether they have come from industry, without having worked previously in post-secondary, to appreciate that the nature of how decisions get made in the faculty. They're not, it's not like a corporation, it's not like a government department. It is a style of decision making that's pretty, I'm going to say it's of post-secondary.
Yes.
And even more particularly of universities. So if you were to go to a college, their governance structure is somewhat different, has more of a kind of a managerial orientation to it in terms of that looks different than here. And the other thing I would say, just not related to this, but having worked in 5 different post-secondaries over time, they're all different as well, right? In terms of the nature and culture of them and how they approach things.
Yeah.
So CAP is quite different than the last place I worked, which was way different than when I work at university.
Yeah, fantastic. Just as you were talking there, it sort of seemed like maybe, one of the key skills is like the art of persuasion might be an important skill for you to have when you're trying to get, people to work together. And
yeah, no, I think it's absolutely true, but I would add to that or underpin that with authenticity and credibility from the perspective of doing what you say you're going to do and living whatever the values are that you're espousing, right? That congruence or alignment of, I think this is important and I need to do things that are kind of in accord with that. That if you don't have that authenticity, that's picked up on pretty quickly.
yes,
That erodes your credibility, and then your chances of persuading anybody to do anything become very, very low.
yeah,
Unless you want to resort to really coercive tactics, but where I've seen people try that, it just don't last very long.
No.
And the reality is, it's happened in every province of Canada. From time to time, there will be non-confidence votes taken by faculties with respect to their dean or universities with respect to their president or their provost. And that's hard to come back from, right? If you have a non-confidence vote, in most cases, you won't be with whatever level or part of the university you're aligned with. It just won't last. So maintaining that confidence of your colleagues is really critical.
Yes.
So credibility, authenticity, accountability become significant factors in whether or not you can decide.
the talk kind of thing in that sense.
But I mean, I think you could say that about life in general. Right?
Yeah.
People that are that do things that aren't in accord with what they say they believe in or about. Pretty quickly you'll look at that individual or not trust what they're saying, or certainly not want to take their guidance in terms of what you should be doing, because they're not actually living that espoused values. So I think it's a more general kind of consideration, but it really plays out in situations like we're talking about, where it is on the basis of relationship and trust that actions will occur. So you really need that credibility to work.
Thank you. That's actually a good segue into my second question. Chip Wilson, who is the founder of Lululemon and other entrepreneurial organizations, once said that what gets you to where you are today is not necessarily going to get you to where you want to be tomorrow. And I was wondering, just sort of thinking about the things that you had just said, if you were to give any advice to anyone in the audience today about, a long, happy career in many ways, what would it be for you that you can kind of draw upon from your experience that got you to where you are today, but recognizing that might not be where it gets you to where you want to be tomorrow?
Sure. Just that quote makes me think of the financial advisor, you get it on your mutual fund statement. Past performances and necessary future. So I'd say a couple things maybe just prefacing the direct response. Like one is, I've try to be mindful of kind of the place that I come from and the path that I've walked, and not make too many assumptions about my experience kind of being the same as those with whom I work, or people who are members of the institution. So I grew up in my formative years, right? We're in the 60s, white, cisgender, straight male, in a few more privileged groups in the history of the world, right? So, and not that I was aware of that growing up, it's just what it was. But so the challenges and the opportunities I have very different than would be the case for people within the institutions and faculty. So I offer that caveat, right? So folks, sort of use that as a filter and consideration in terms of response. So I think the one kind of area I would touch on, and I think you and I may have talked about this previously, or came up in a meeting we were in, it's doing work that has purpose. Right. For me, that's not quite the same as being passionate about your work, though I think that's a good thing as well. But it's the thing for me that has been, enabled me to overcome other challenges within the work, because I believe that the mission that we're engaged in with public education is absolutely one of the highest purposes, right? And Nelson Mandela, right, had the quote about, the most powerful weapon to transform the world is education. And so that's always resonated for me, right? So when I think about coming to work every day, it's from the perspective that it's more than, pushing this paper across the desk or going through a whole bunch of meetings. We're engaged in an endeavor that is going to change the world, right? The people who graduate from our university are going to go out into all sorts of walks of life to make a difference, right? And so to the extent that we can fulfill our obligations as educators, we're going to hopefully then contribute to a better world, right? And so if anybody ever asks me, for my opinion on what's important, that one really stands out for me, Robin. It's really critical. And if I could add to that, I mean, one of the, and I think probably many here have experienced it in terms of, what the discussions we have with family, with friends, which is that, people end up going down career paths for a whole bunch of reasons. And sometimes it's not about, it's influenced by others, let's put it that way, or that people pursue paths that they think are good ones to pursue in terms of some form of social application. And maybe it's going to be a good job, good financial outcome, etc. And it's not that that's unimportant, that's really critical. But I both lived it and seen it, that to the extent that work has purpose for you, then you can sustain it. Right? Yeah. And feel like those, you're talking earlier about frustrations, that's just part of what you need to work through to fulfill that purpose, right? So anyways, that would be, if I was offering advice, that would be the point I would really land on it. That's strong.
I think just for you folks in the audience there, something to keep in mind, right, is from what I'm getting from you, Dennis, is that it's, understand why. Why am I doing this? What is the purpose of me doing this position or this job or this task? Is start with the why, and I think when you look at something like that, can be very important. Yeah, absolutely.
And really just push that point a little bit further, and not to get too deep into kind of homilies, but there's a tale, right, of the three bricklayers. And they're asked, what are you doing? Like, what are you working on? And one person says, well, I'm laying bricks. And the second one says, well, I'm building a church. And the third one says, I'm building a gateway to my God. Right? And so for one, it's just simply a job. For a second, it's a career. And for the third, it's a mission of life. Right? Yeah. They're doing the same work. Yeah. Right? It's not like they're involved in different tasks. So there is an element of it in terms of seeing the purpose of the work and the benefits it has too, right? Sort of thinking about, okay, how can this work that I'm doing, irrespective of, say, the England University, irrespective of where I'm working, it still contributes to the same mission. Right? It's still about transforming the world through the knowledge and skills we can impart to the people that come here to learn, grow, and
absolutely. I think there's some very sort of powerful advice coming from, sort of focusing on what is it that you want to do, rather than necessarily what expectations of others might bring to you. Just looking at my questions here. Next one that I had on my list here was about envisioning 2030. This, of course, is part of the university's strategic plan on where they want to be and where they're going. Without getting sort of too deep into the weeds, could you tell us about some of the initiatives that the Faculty of Business and Professional Studies are engaged in, which are working towards envisioning 2030?
Okay. So likely most people that are here have heard of Envisioning 2030, and it's on the website, and it was part of a pretty significant process. And just one of the things maybe folks don't know is the university, but the leadership of the university chose to take an approach that would, as best we could with our level of knowledge and understanding at that point in time, decolonize the strategic planning process. So it was intentionally not called the strategic plan. And the way that the engagement happened was quite different than you might see with a traditional strategic plan. I wasn't here at that time, but I understand that. And that congruence, again, in terms of what the university was espousing and trying to do and making efforts to take a different approach, I think is actually really revealing in terms of the new leadership of the university and their commitment to the set of values. So Envisioning 2030 has 3 pillars, right? Community engagement, distinct university experience, and inspired by imagination. And so in terms of thinking about our priorities, those in fact underpin a lot of what we've been looking at and talking about within the faculty over the last several years. And again, for folks' information, our approach to planning at the university, we have a 3-year rolling plan, right? So every fall we prepare an update of our planning plans at the end of the calendar year, and it comes into effect for April 1. So we actually will be starting the year. So some of the highlights or strong areas for attention, let's say, and some of this is a little bit of me, and then some of it's the collective faculty. So one of my priorities in terms of moving forward, just the work of the faculty, is around trying to find ways to engage with the various constituencies that are touched by my role, or vice versa, influence the work that I do. So finding different ways to connect with faculty, and so some of the things that we've done in terms of the special topic sessions that have been held, and the Ask Me Anything sessions that we did a few times throughout the year. On the student side, picking up and having regular communication with and meetings with our reps for CSU, and thinking about how to plug into opportunities like today, so that there's a different kind of interaction between myself and students. So that process piece, I think, is really important to kind of be grounded within the university. In terms of real, resident priorities, decolonization and indigenization for our faculty and the university as a whole is really important. The university will soon, unveil or make more public its plan for Indigenous education. And then each faculty will tie into that. Also, over the last 18 months, we've had a lot of discussion within the faculty about how we're going to proceed on that. And we've got an activity coming up soon to talk more about where does this land in terms of the actual work that we do, right? In the classroom, through our research, and engaging with communities and supporting those nations that in the area that we serve to achieve the goals and aspirations that they have for both self-governance and also social and economic development. I think that one will remain with us for quite some time.
Yes.
Second, and sort of for me sits kind of at the same level, is sustainability, and what can a faculty such as ours contribute to a sustainable future? And I think about that particularly through the lens of what we teach and how we teach it, and so the skills and knowledge that we're able to enable students to acquire while they're here, that then they will be able to take into their future careers and then contribute to the sustainability of either the places they're working or the communities that they're part of. And for me, this one is, I told some folks here, I've heard me say before, it's existential. Like, it's not about whether this is a good idea for us to do or not. It's imperative, right?
Yeah.
If we do not do this and take leadership in this role, then those who are graduating and their children are going to have a world that is not going to be very livable and hospitable. And so we have an obligation, especially given the I guess the privilege that we've had in terms of the roles that we've fulfilled, to take meaningful action in that area. So those are conversations I very much look forward to, because I want to see us move from talking about sustainability as a concept, thinking about it in terms of what we're doing in those key areas of involvement that we have, particularly the classroom. So that one for me is really important. I mentioned earlier that one of the pillars of our strategic framework, I'll call it, is being inspired by imagination. And that's another one, sort of a different, it's got a different kind of tone to it, but it's a question of, if we're inspired by imagination as teachers or administrators or students or people in community, what does that actually mean? Like, how would CAP look different as an institution if we're actually animating that organizing principle? And so that's another area where we're now actively engaged in discussion, not only in our faculty, but trying to stimulate work within the university as a whole. And we've got some activities that will be taking place with the Center for Teaching and Learning to talk about imaginative education, the classroom. How this could be actually picked up by Senate and be kind of moved out into the broader competencies that we're trying to achieve within the university, working with Simon Fraser and the Center for Imagination and Education Research and other academic initiatives, and enabling our faculty to engage with faculty from those other institutions. It's actually a global center, so it will enable us to work with people further afield. And by and through that, enrich the practice that we bring to our education here, again, hopefully open up opportunities for students. And so, yeah, I'd say that this one for me is an exciting one, right? Because it enables us to tap into our imaginations in a way that's positive and constructive and formative. Like a lot of what's gone on over the last couple of years has been reactive and challenging and tense and conflicted in a lot of different ways. And that's just what it was. It's just the nature of the things that we've been working through. But to think about a mandate that also enables us to be creative and developmental and imagine new ways for us to engage in education. I've been part of 4 or 5 conversations with the working group on this, and everyone I've gone to the sessions that come out of it going, this is very cool.
Yeah.
In terms of where we might potentially go.
I think also just very quickly there, saying a lot of what you've just sort of mentioned there, even through the 3 pillars that you talked about, actually ties back into what you were talking about, sort of recognizing your purpose, not only as an individual, right, as advice but as an institution, as a business, as an organization. It is not only stating this is what we want to do and these are the things that we're going to try, but it is believing in that and having others believe in it and get behind it. And I think that, as you say, whether it's sustainability, whether it's indigenization, or whether it's imagination, like there's 3 pretty important and pretty interesting ways in which you can really get people excited, I think, about what Capilano University, what the Faculty of Business and Professional Studies are going to equip the next generation with.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Where you've got that alignment between, your stated values, right, those foundational pieces of the organization, we'll call it, and the actual activities that are taking place and the work you're trying to achieve in terms of making a difference, I think provides or offers the chance for credibility to build in terms of, here we're talking about the university as a whole.
Right.
The flip side of that, of course, is if you over here we're talking about we value people, and we value health and wellness. And over here, and I'm not saying we are, but if you're over here, then doing things that compromise that, right? You know, ways of treating people or their work conditions that compromise their health and wellness, or that don't provide them with opportunities to engage their imagination in creative ways to improve and change their not only their own workplace, but the work that's going on with students in their particular department or area, then that incongruence becomes problematic and affects the critical organization overall. So I think that seeking that alignment is really important. And that isn't to say that there isn't turbulence, right? We live in a very turbulent world where we've seen over the last, well, we'll use the last 2 years, and I'm thinking not only about the pandemic, I'm thinking about, you know, sort of the atmospheric rivers and the, you know, the fires of the southern interior where my family home is, and more recently with the war in Ukraine, right? I mean, those are all significantly affecting events, right? That are kind of influencing people's energy and, you know, their capacity to be able to engage in new things. So I am mindful that, you know, there's only so far we can go in any of these initiatives right now, just given sort of the macro context in which people are operating. But I guess my feeling is, as long as we continue to lean into it, right, and provide enough activation energy to keep it moving, then we will be positioned to take advantage of the opportunities then that are emerging. And so all the things we talked about, you know, certain decolonization and indigenization, all things that those are long-term endeavors. We're not going to, you know, correct the challenges that we have in a semester or a year. We're going to be working on this over time. And what's really critical is that we're taking action, moving forward, learning from our mistakes, because we're for sure going to make them, right? It's inevitable. And be able to take those mistakes and then build that into our process to kind of iterate and forward with hopefully better strategies, solutions, and, you know, ways of approaching other issues.
Fantastic. I'm just looking at the time here, and I've got lots of questions, but I'm not going to get through them all. But I do want to ask if anybody either here or if we've had anybody join us online, if they've got a question that they would like to put to Dennis today. Yeah, please. What was your name? Sorry.
Terrence.
Hey, Terrence.
Great. Just a question for Dennis. First off, thank you, Robin, for moderator, and thank you, Dennis, for doing this. I think what we're seeing right now is a lot of the students historically that attend the school business program, they spend 2 years and then they finish their degree at one of the major institutions such as UBC, SFU, or heck, they even like apply out to Ryerson or University of Toronto. But I think what we're seeing now is a lot of the students in the school of business are actually finishing their 4-year degrees here. So my sort of question for those students that are trying to decide whether should I do 4 years at CAP, should I do 2 years here at CAP and then transfer to UBC or UVic, what are some things that stand out within the faculty of business? How do we word this? What are some things that stand out with the faculty of business in which a student should finish their degree?
Sure. That's a really interesting question. So I'll set a context. There's a couple of parts to this one. One is for me as a student, right, going back to undergrad. So I was not a very good student in secondary school, like really not. And a couple years I almost failed. So when I graduated from high school, I couldn't get into a university, right? So I went, at that time, Kwantlen didn't exist. So I went to Douglas College, did 2 years transfer there, moved on to Simon Fraser. So I do have a lot of appreciation for the transfer system in BC, and Brandon's not aware. BC has one of the best transfer systems probably in the world, right, in terms of how well developed it is. So I'm in some ways I'm a fan of the transfer model, but in terms of thinking about CAP and why somebody one would come, I suppose, and then secondly why they might stay, it's in part because the purpose of CAP is to be a teaching university, and so if you're versus, I won't say, I shouldn't say versus, but thinking about, say, my alma mater at Simon Fraser, or thinking about UBC or U of T, which are incredible universities, right? Like BC has some great universities, those are doing, but they're not focused on undergraduate education. That's not their primary focus. They're research intensive, and UBC is a you know, it's a U15 school with medical programs and whatnot. So their focus is more on graduate programming and the research that sort of surrounds their whole endeavor. And having worked at a U15 school, that focus on your research and how you can move your research program forward is a significant imperative of those schools. That's not the case here, right? So here, CAP is about teaching, and so the focus is on, okay, so how can we provide the students in an undergraduate program with the best experiences possible, so that when they graduate, they're going to have the best rounded opportunities or they're going to have the best rounded background for the opportunities they're going to pursue. And so if you think about research at CAP is really focused on undergraduates and undergraduate education. So it's approached from the perspective of complementing the work that goes on in the classroom, rather than being driven primarily by the research program of the faculty member as they're moving forward. So I would say that any, talking to any high school class, I mean, not saying you're not going to get a good education at Simon Fraser. It's a great university, but if you want a quality undergraduate education, look at an institution like CAP, because you'll be able to get much more out of that, much more access to folks like Robin and Michael than you would ever see at one of those major universities. So that's my kind of, I'm going to say somewhat biased perspective, but I do say that from the point of view of being a student at 4 different institutions and having worked, like I say, at a half dozen. I think for the undergraduate, this is the place to stay. That said, if I can just pursue this a little bit further, just one of the challenges of CAP is that transfer or inflection point. So a lot of students do leave CAP after year 2 and move on to other institutions, and I think that's one of the really important areas for the university to look at, is how to make that case to those students that are moving through, that this is the place where they're going to get the highest quality of 3rd and 4th year experiences that are going to provide them with the most benefit as they move on with their next steps, whatever that is, going to grad school, professional school, moving into a professional position somewhere.
Fantastic. Unfortunately, we are almost at 1 o'clock. This is for a testament to the depth of the answers that Dennis gave. I didn't necessarily think we were going to get such insight. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for coming today. This is the first of our In Conversation With series. It is our plan that we are going to be having more of these conversations and inviting alumni and business leaders to come in to kind of just talk to you about their experience and their life and what they think is important for us. So I think I'll wrap it up by saying, many of you may not know who the Eagles as a band are, but if you do, I'll leave you with a quote from them that said, "Thank you for getting us through this first one. It's all downhill from here." Right. Thank you very much for joining us today. Much appreciated. So folks, if you haven't had anything to eat and you would like something to eat, or if you've had something to eat and you would like something more to eat, we shoot some stuff. We have food over there available. Please take it and enjoy. Thank you very much for coming. Much appreciated.
To an extent. Actually lived. I moved. Yeah. Oh, you don't know. I moved to Philadelphia when I moved to the West. By myself. And now I live in Denver. It's not, I'm like, like go back and
Now
back.
you're gonna not be able to go, right?
Yeah, no.
You can go to bars and stuff. No, but in theory.
Yeah, I don't know.
How much more on them. Now, is there anybody else? Delilah? Well, that's. No.
Delilah. You know, Carissa got married.
No way.
Carissa got
That's good for her.
married. She got engaged the day she graduated. Rebecca Mullins is back here.
She's in the early one.
Yeah, she is. I think, the other Rebecca's also. I haven't changed that.
You could also think about politics.
I know it is. One of the plans.
Yes.
All right, here's the plan. We get the joint JDMB. Okay, well, yeah.
No, every law school.
MBA.
Okay. Okay, yeah, there's some of those around, yeah.
Then I get my master's. Then I want my PhD. And then I want to come back here.
Okay.
Like, yeah, because I don't have 11 years.
So you have to get the help. Otherwise, it's just. There's a lot of smart people.
Yeah.
And that guy, you can get private lessons. And he's way better than that. Yeah, he's like a genius. And yeah, anyway, get that and be fine. But it's also, you got to take 6 months off and like put yourself in room. And just practice.
Yeah, plan for academics. And then in my work, I work as a member of parliament.
You and Delilah, I can't see that. I was yeah, that's right. Getting an email every now and again. Because you're going down there.
No, it's a big program for the UN right now. Just work on financial literacy, like getting to know, like, when you do look at grades for your I don't even know. You read my essay where I applied. I was a good high school. It was here actually. It was
So he's starting a law. I guess some sort of idea.
And then I came here to program and then I stayed here for 2 years. And I went to Pennsylvania. I'm either doing legal or doing fortunately legal, I didn't, so I could do it, but putting it all in it's like this go back to and in fact,
the answer is relatively short. So you're like, okay, next question, and then you end up.
Jesus, Sophia. Don't keep, don't fire me.
I don't like this.
He's another, well, you know, somebody wrote a letter.
The answer's not.
Well, makes sense.
Take us down a slightly different.
I'm so sorry. I was at one and I'm running late. I'm so sorry. Good to see you. So good to see you. Yeah, I'm working at Virgin. It's my practice with you. It's so good to see you. I'm so sorry to run
That's great. So, yeah, a couple years.
We graduated in 2020, so everything, we had no ceremony. They're asking us to come back. For 2022. It's June 7th.
If it's adding value.
And you know what you are for? I know, you know what you are for?
I'm a pastor.
No, I did it.
You got to keep that conversation. So I'll ask you the next question. And I There's all
It's
that.
at night, my testing is at night, driving in the morning. So I'm like, what if that whole day I just have win after win?
It'll just be like, Jesse Eisenberg.
Yeah,
Like some sort of-
we started at just about 20 past.
but, yeah,
And it got
Or
to
Michael Serum.
10 to.
Yeah.
So it was female.
I got
Coming
at
of
least
age,
throw it open
did-
for at least
you're
one
already
question.
20 years old. and
Yeah.
So yeah, we went at
It'll be like a,
and then again, looking.
I've known you since I was 17.
That,
You what?
that would probably be, as you say, you've got four.
yeah, you were just out of high
Right,
school.
then you know that you've got.
You were just out of high school.
I
No,
know.
I mean, it is natural, but it is,
Yeah,
it is,
it's weird.
it is true that people, some people keep their, I feel sorry. I do, because you know, it's part of their job. And some people think in their twenties, honestly,
They ask, use this.
when I got my, after I got my education degree, my career was taken off.
Yeah.
Like, I
Really,
kind of
realistically, ask 3 of them or 4 of them. But you've got that bank of questions. And I think that, then what
So people
the
move in
organisation
organizations
does is look at
So
those.
don't- just don't be
You can't always ask them all, but at least you're getting a sense
I
of.
went to law school and I was a
what
lawyer
people
for,
want to know. So that if you do this
20
again,
years, and then I came
you
here.
maybe you address some of those.
Became a teacher back here. And it was.
She's getting the, no, Karen, she's getting the alumni award this year.
Yeah, she's, I
I
know,
voted for her.
did you really?
I did.
Wow, you're even more mature than me. Jesus, Sophia. I heard about all stuff.
You know, what it was.
I feel bad about Barzak.
I'm pissed at Barzak. I refuse to speak. So what had happened with the whole family?
Yeah, she played bad law, good cop, bad cop or something.
No. She said, let's have a meeting, and we knew what it was at, we were in the house. But how it happened was, Barzak texted me, he said, hey, I'm really confused about the assignment, can I try to review yours to make sure that I understand it? So I said, sure. And then he submitted it, but then he gave it to Delilah. So Delilah submitted mine, Barzak submitted mine,